Hello and welcome to the Path of Consorts. I'm Taki'h,
Timo.
and this is the second part to a five-part series about how not to fight, or when you're fighting, how to pull yourself back. And it's something that is a gift that we share in our relating. We have actually, in the time we've been together now, almost 4 years, we have actually never had a fight. So, one of the things that supports us is this principle of not collecting stamps. So, this is a technical term, you can kind of say, and it's something that comes from my training and the phrase stamp collecting. If you think about stamps and how, okay, maybe a long while ago when people used to still send
I did.
send mail by post. Sometimes children would collect, or even adults would collect stamps from different parts of the world, or more rare stamps, this kind of stamps. Okay, so but the point is that you're collecting and you're collecting, and at the end you have all these stamps. So it's like collecting anything, accumulating something, and that's what this refers to. So it's the accumulation of bad feelings. Bad feelings, what does that mean? It can be accumulating, feeling hurt, feeling rejected, feeling jealousy, feeling grief, uh, whatever, frustration, um, bitterness. But it's this accumulating of bad feelings as a result of some interaction with your partner. It can be with anybody, but right now we're talking about in the relationship. So this is what stamp collecting is. So one of our key principles is that we don't collect stamps. That's our intention, to not collect stamps. So first of all, you need to know that you've actually collected stamp. In order to then do something about it, you need to realize that you've collected stamp. So this is something that you are sharing, that it's very clear in your body what happens when something is not um, resolved or cleared or processed, and there's a bad feeling that's been accumulated, that has collected. Then your body will tell you. Everybody's body will say something, will give you an indicator. And for you, you were saying,
Yeah, for me, it's a very particular, like very pointed feeling in my throat. Like I have a lump in my throat. There's something in my system that hasn't come out. Like I feel it, that there's something that I haven't cleared. There's an emotion that I haven't shared with her, or there was something that I got triggered, or whatever it is. I feel that there's like a residue in my system that wants to come out. And that's it's a very helpful for me to feel that, because that gives me that extra push to actually act on it, to actually clear it.
okay. So for me, it varies. It's not so precise. Like for Timo, it's like this go-to thing. For me, I can feel like I can't look at this person in the eyes, maybe, if it's because I haven't cleared something that's mine. I know that I've been off. Or I can feel this kind of like buzz, this like zzz, vibrations inside of me, like as if there's zzz, and it's like this low level of like anxiousness around this person, like something's ugh. Or I might feel just super sensitive. I might feel super sensitive that like I, the like a spoon was dropped, and I'm like, why are you always dropping things or whatever in my head. And I realize like, okay, there's either something's happening in me or there's something between us that needs clearing. So there are two basic ways to clear something. One is to ask is the key word, your partner. First is to realize, okay, what is it that hurt you, or what is it that led you to feel a certain way? And so you can ask your partner, instead of accusing, instead of assuming. So you ask, did you mean this and that? Like, did you mean to say, when you said this or when you did that, did you mean, and if I've interpreted that as he meant that I'm not important or I'm ugly or I'm too much or I'm whatever I've concluded, I clarify. I ask, did you mean that? Or was that your intention? Because that's how it felt to me. That's how I took it. That's how I perceived it. And I want to know if that's how you meant it. If I want to know if that's where you were coming from. And if the answer is no, then I know that there's something inside of me that, you know, I put on these lenses and I started to see, and also these audiophones, that I started to hear and see the world through this wound or this sensitivity or this whatever, because of stamps I've collected in previous times of my life. And then that gets triggered now by something that I interpret to then also mean that. And actually that's not at all what he was saying, not at all what he was meaning, not at all what he was intending. So one thing is to come to your partner and clarify.
And that does take some practice. If there is some certain situation which also already like almost have like a dialogue that repeats itself, and then even if then the dialogue isn't that, it's really hard to see that the other person isn't actually saying that what you're expecting them to say. So then to just like question yourself that, did you actually hear that? Or did she actually say that? And ask. But it does take practice.
It does take practice, and especially for those who have been together for some time and who have already a backlog, like a few catalogs of stamps that have been collected, that clearing needs to happen, and it might take time. It may not be just one conversation that needs to happen, that like, yeah, last night when you said this and it's been like sitting with me, did you mean that? So there might be a lot of their patterns will develop around certain dynamics, and stamps will be collected around those dynamics, and then fights will happen even though there's in this moment nothing that really needs to result in a fight. And you were sharing how in the past, because you know it's not our lived experience, but I know that this has been your case in the past.
Yeah, when there is years of accumulation of certain dynamics, power games, of touching each other's wounds, and then it's all like hidden. It's all in this stamp collection, huge book, and then something comes up which doesn't need to have anything to do with that whole collection, but then it just blows up, and I just go into my wound thinking that that's what she's meaning, and that's me collecting all those, cashing in all those stamps that I have collected, and it's tricky. It's really tricky.
So yes, it's tricky, and it's totally possible that, and that's what happens is then after you've collected enough stamps, then you want to trade them in and get something for them, right? And that's usually the fight. That's usually then the going to the previous video of, I'm right, you're wrong. Look, I have all these stamps that prove so. So the intention is to not get there, to not get to that point where it blows up. And you can think of like a fire with a lot of dry wood or paper, and then you just have one thing that gets sparked. It's like that one comment during dinner, or that, you know, lovemaking that was just off, or that, you know, he didn't notice your new haircut, or she didn't remember the anniversary, or whatever the spark is. And it just lights up this little, you know, this little twig, but that twig is attached to this big pile of paper or dry wood, and it just goes poof. And that can be an oversensitivity, and it can be like lashing out, and it can be like blowing up in that stereotypical sense of like yelling, crying, and having a big fight kind of thing. Or that blowing up can be like completely disconnecting and ignoring or detaching, not speaking, not staying connected. I mean, that blowing up doesn't have to look like a volcano. So recognize the way you blow up may not be that stereotypical fiery way, but it doesn't mean your hasn't happened. So one way to clear it is to check. Did you mean that? Was that your intention? And if you've got 20 years backlog of stamps and therefore dynamics that have been created around them and patterns then and matching wounds, that I say that I feel I go into this wound, my partner goes into this wound, and then they just match, then it's going to take more clearing. And yeah, it's tricky, but it's totally possible. And perhaps nobody has taught you this, and I'm grateful that I got trained in this, and that's why I know about it. But before that also I collected stamps. So that's one side of it. And another way to clear is for you to own and take responsibility for your part. So there's always two sides. One is, hey, did I understand this correctly because it hurts? Is that what you meant? And the other side is, I need to take responsibility for something I've said or not said, something I've done or not done. And maybe you didn't even notice. Maybe it flew under the radar for you, or maybe you didn't collect stamps, or maybe you did collect a stamp and you didn't recognize that you've collected a stamp. You didn't recognize it already. And then I come and say, I was off. I came with this energy, or I was wanting to hurt you, or to push that button, or whatever, and you come to clear.
Yeah, to check that, am I actually reacting to this situation, or am I having all this, I was wronged, and bringing it now, I can like lash at you because I have a situation, I have a reason now to be right, and to really own it, like, where are you coming from? Are you really wanting to solve this situation and come back together, or are you using it to be right, to
fight or to cash in your stamps? Yeah. And so, but it doesn't even have to be lashing out. Like the lashing out might be obvious, but the other person might have the pattern of thinking it's always their fault or something they've done wrong and they're the wrong one, and they may have that pattern, so they may not even say anything to you. So this is where your integrity comes in. This is where your commitment, there's previous videos on that about commitment. What are you committed to? Are you committed to love and presence and truth, freedom, whatever you're committed to, that's where that commitment comes in, and say, even if you haven't noticed, even if you think it was your fault, even if I, and you're using the previous video of that you're arguing who's right and wrong, even if I've argued that I'm right and you're wrong, even if all of that has happened and now we're like, it's resolved, we've gotten through it, I know I'm off. I know I was off, and I need to come and clear it, because the mind may resolve things, justify, understand, or whatever, but the body will accumulate those stamps, and eventually those, there's like a little scratch happens in the first, or, and then a bigger scratch and a deeper scratch, and it just continues and continues, and then eventually you're just saying hi, and it's like, ouch. Then that's how our triggers happen, is that there's so much accumulated that then the slightest hint, or my interpretation of that, becomes a reason to fight. And so this is another way we avoid fighting, is we continuously clear the stamps, clear the accumulation. And the way you put it, do you remember what you were saying?
Well, for me, it's also a body sensation of that I feel so relaxed and just so flowing when there is nothing pending, when everything is cleared. So in this relationship where we continuously clean what comes up, it's, first of all, it's much easier to clean because it's just about that one thing, and it usually takes a few sentences and a hug, and we're back to connection. And and is for me, that's so important, that I can relax around her, I can feel safe, and I can feel in love, and all it needs to just a little bit of clearing. So to me, this is like, the rewards is huge, and so the ego or wanting to be right doesn't stand a chance against what it is, how I feel after it's cleared.
Yeah, that's a very important point. And you can look at it as just like, don't you clean your house regularly? Don't you dust or vacuum regularly and like wipe the windows or, clean the toilet, whatever you do? Of course you do that regularly. Why wouldn't you do this for your relationship regularly? Of course you do this for your relationship regularly.
Yeah, and not assume that those unattended situations would just be forgotten and go away unless they are attended to.
Yeah.
They'll accumulate, and they then slowly start making this connection and start pushing you away from each other.
This is the key point. Do not assume that it will take care of itself. It'll be forgotten, and if we don't talk about it, it'll just go away, and then we can just go back to how we were, or go back to being normal, or whatever. No, that's just wishful thinking, and it ends up in lots of pain in the long run. So practice the non-stamp collecting. That when you get a stamp, you get that mail, then right away, I'm going to put this on the table for us to look at, to feel, to clarify, whether it's something that's come in or a letter I wrote with a stamp on it, whichever way it goes, and clear it, clean it, and so you have a clean slate every morning when you wake up.
Even if it seems to be really minor, seems to be that it's okay, that I can pass it, it's nothing, but there's even a tiniest feeling that there's something off, then do it.
Yes, if you feel like you're still carrying something, it doesn't matter. Your mind will say, your ego will say, oh, it's okay, it doesn't matter, you don't need to talk about everything, my God, like, and like, you're still processing and still digging, and like, and we have so many other things to do, can't we just have a nice evening for once, or all this stuff that will come up. Don't listen. Be like, no, actually, this little thing needs clearing, because things will be built, lots of pain will be built on this little foundation stone. So don't let it be there. And by bringing it out, you'll go into so much deeper intimacy together, even in the little thing. Like, when he comes to me sometimes, he's like, yeah, I felt that. And I'm like, oh my God, you understood it that way? Like all that happened in you? I had no idea. And certainly I had no intention. And it's just opens my heart, and I'm like, Jesus, like, you do not have to suffer this way. I'm not my intention. Or if he points something out that like, yeah, that was a moment of unconsciousness, I'm so sorry. Like, yeah, I can see in retrospect how, if I look in and I check with myself, yeah, I was angry that whatever, and there I came out like that, and that hurt you, and I'm so sorry. That was a moment of unconsciousness. Either way, I can take responsibility, or I can clarify, and we come into deeper intimacy.
Yeah, and the key thing is not to tell the other person what he meant, or say that you did this. Ask.
Yeah,
tell how it feels in you,
yeah,
and ask what they meant.
Thank you for joining us today. This was the second part, and we'll continue. See you next time.